There's something about rural roads at night. The way the darkness stretches on 4 miles, swallowing up headlights and silencing everything but your own tires on the pavement. The way even familiar places begin to feel unfamiliar. Isolated. Empty. Like the world folds in on itself once the sun goes down. Tonight, we take you into one of those roads. It's the kind of story that begins without warning. No dramatic build-up. No sense that something is about to shift. Just a regular night in a quiet part of the country. A young man driving home. A phone call to let his parents know he's okay. The kind of thing that happens thousands of times every night across America. Except this time, it didn't end the way it was supposed to. What follows is not a story filled with headlines or courtroom twists. There are no viral videos, no confessions, no footage to analyze frame by frame. Just a single moment, a voice. Then, silence. And what happened next has baffled investigators, gripped internet forums, and changed how one state responds to the moment someone goes missing. But this isn't just about mystery. It's about what people do in the face of the unknown. It's about how a single night can fracture into 1,000 questions, and how the absence of answers can sometimes echo louder than the truth. So, buckle up. Because this story doesn't follow straight lines, and where it leads might leave you wondering how someone could simply vanish without a trace. Welcome to this episode of True Crime for a Long Drive. Let's begin. It was May 13th, 2008. A cool spring night in southwestern Minnesota. The kind of night where the air carries the scent of damp earth and freshly turned fields, where the stars seem brighter away from the city lights. For 19-year-old Brandon Swanson, it was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday. He'd spent the evening at a friend's place in the small town of Canby, celebrating the end of the semester. Nothing wild, just a few drinks. Some laughter. The kind of low-key gathering that fills the spaces between exams and summer jobs. Brandon was in good spirits when he left around midnight. He was a likable guy. Friendly, responsible. The kind of young man who called his parents to let them know he was on his way. He climbed into his white 1997 Chevy Lumina, a car that had seen its share of backroad miles. The engine turned over with a familiar rumble, and he pulled onto the quiet 2-lane highway, heading toward home. Now, picture this drive with me. The roads out here aren't like city streets, no sidewalks, just long stretches of asphalt cutting through farmland. The kind of road where your high beams catch the reflective eyes of deer lurking in the ditches, where the only signs of life might be a distant porch light, or the glow of a silo under the moon. He'd driven them countless times before. But tonight would be different. Somewhere along County Road 68, near the Yellow Medicine River, something went wrong. Maybe a deer darted out. Maybe fatigue blurred his vision for just a second. Or maybe the darkness itself played tricks. Roads at night have a way of hiding curves, dips, the edges where gravel meets ditch. Whatever the reason, Brandon's car left the road. No shattered glass, no twisted metal. The Lumina came to rest in a shallow ditch, tires sunk into soft earth. Brandon was unhurt, just frustrated. Maybe a little embarrassed. He tried to reverse out, but the wheels spun helplessly. No luck. He was stuck, but not trapped. The engine still ran. The headlights still cut through the dark. And in the distance, he could see lights, tiny pinpricks that might have been a farmhouse. Maybe even the outskirts of Taunton, a town just a few miles away. So, he made a decision. He'd walk toward those lights, find help, call a tow truck in the morning. But first, he'd let his parents know what happened. At 1:54 a.m., he dialed home. Brian and Annette Swanson were used to late-night calls from their son. He was responsible that way, always checking in. But this time, his voice carried a different tone. Not fear, not panic, but annoyance. The kind of irritation you feel when a simple drive turns into a hassle. He explained the situation. The car was stuck, but he was fine. He could see lights ahead. He'd walk toward them, get his bearings. Maybe find someone who could help.
I'm stuck in a ditch. I think I'm near Taunton.
Okay, where exactly are you?
I don't know. I can see lights, though. I'm gonna walk toward them.
For the next 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the line with his parents as he walked. The conversation was ordinary, no panic, no signs of distress. At one point, Brandon even laughed when his dad joked about the hassle of towing the car the next day. Then, at 2:42 a.m., everything changed.
Oh, shit.
Brandon, you there?
2 words. That's all it took. 2 words, and then nothing. No scream, no struggle, no explanation. Just the empty hum of an open line, and the distant sound of wind through the receiver. Brian and Annette called out again and again, Brandon, Brandon, but the night didn't answer. Somewhere in the darkness, their son had vanished, mid-sentence, mid-step, as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. What happened in those final seconds? Did he slip into the river? Did he fart and fall in the mud? Did an animal startle him? Or was there someone or something waiting in the dark? The answers, if they exist, lie in the next segment, where we'll dissect those last moments, the desperate search that followed, and the eerie clues that only deepened the mystery. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when everything shifted. One moment, Brian and Annette Swanson were on the phone with their son, Brandon, listening to the sound of his voice, to the occasional crunch of gravel underfoot, to the soft breeze moving across the line. The next moment, there was only silence. 2 words had cut through that silence, like a blade. Oh shit. Then nothing. No scream, no scuffle, no final goodbye. Just the quiet, haunting presence of an open call. The connections still live, like a lifeline stretched into a void. They called his name, again and again. Brandon, Brandon, are you okay? What happened? But the night didn't respond. Think about that moment. You're a parent. You've stayed up late before, worried about your teenager driving at night, but reassured when they call to say they're fine. Maybe a little annoyed, maybe a little lost, but safe. Then suddenly, mid-conversation, something shifts. You hear fear, just for a moment. And then, the quiet. Brian and Annette didn't hang up. They refused to let go of the line. 4 minutes, long, breathless minutes. They listened, hoping he'd come back on, hoping maybe he'd drop the phone, that he'd pick it up, that he'd laugh and say, sorry, I slipped, or stupid ditch, or anything at all. But the silence grew longer. He never came back, so they did what any parent would do. They got in their car and started driving, not toward Porter, where his phone would later be pinged, but toward where Brandon said he was, just outside of Lind. Remember, it's pitch black. These aren't highways. These are rural gravel roads, unmarked driveways that snake between cornfields and barbed wire fences. It's easy to get turned around, even when you know the area. Even more so when you're frantic, imagining the worst. They searched the roads, shining headlights into culverts, calling his name out the window, driving slowly, pulling over, getting out, yelling into the dark, and still no sign of Brandon, no sign of his car, no flash of white paint reflecting moonlight, nothing. At sunrise, the Swansons called the police, but the initial response, underwhelming. Brandon was 19, legally an adult. He had been drinking earlier in the evening. There was no evidence of a struggle, no wrecked car, no signs of danger. Maybe he just went to a friend's house. Maybe he passed out in a field. Maybe he was just being dramatic. The implication was clear. Don't panic yet. But Brian and Annette refused to wait. Their son had disappeared mid-phone call. That wasn't typical. That wasn't something you shrugged off. They pushed hard. Eventually, the Lyon County Sheriff's Department agreed to ping Brandon's phone. The results were confusing. Brandon had told them he thought he was near Lind, just a few miles from home, but the cell tower ping placed him nowhere near there. It came from Minneota, closer to Porter, over 20 miles away from where he believed he was. How does that happen? Brandon wasn't directionally challenged. He'd grown up in the area, he knew those roads, and yet he'd been completely turned around. Somehow, everything he described, the lights in the distance, the slight incline of the ditch, the roads he thought he recognized, didn't match up with reality. Was he confused, disoriented, or was something else going on? When they finally found Brandon's car, it was off a gravel road outside Taunton, a small town with fewer than 150 residents. The Lumina was not crashed. It wasn't overturned. It wasn't burned out or hidden. It was just there, as if someone had parked it, stepped out, and never returned. The keys were gone, so was Brandon's phone, but otherwise, everything was intact. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no signs of someone else being there, no tracks suggesting a chase, just a car, sitting still, waiting for no one. That's when the real search began. Sheriffs, volunteers, friends, neighbors. They all joined in. They brought in search dogs, helicopters, ATVs, For days they combed the area. A scent trail was found. It led away from the car, up the road, across fields, and toward an old, abandoned farmhouse. Then, it stopped. Dead. Not faded. Not meandering. Just stopped, like someone had vanished into thin air. Dogs trained to follow scent as far as possible, just lost it, completely. It was as if Brandon had stepped off the earth. By now, the media had caught wind of the story. But even with attention, no new leads came in. No one had seen him. No one had heard from him. His phone remained dark. No banking activity. No social media. No body. Just a missing person. And to parents caught in a waking nightmare. Think about the psychology here. Brandon wasn't running away. He had plans, a summer job lined up, classes to finish, a cat he loved at home. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't in trouble. He was a planner, the kind of guy who called his parents at 1:54 a.m. to say, "Hey, I'm fine, I'm just stuck in a ditch." He was connected, he wanted to be found, and then he was gone. What about the two words? Oh shit, what could they mean? A stumble, a fall. Did he slip down a ravine? Step into the river? Did someone approach him? Something startle him? Did he see something? What does that phrase signal? Panic? Surprise? Recognition? The simplicity of it is what haunts people most. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't fear. It was realization, like someone seeing something they didn't expect and having no time to react. Despite every effort, Brandon Swanson has never been found. No trace of him, no clothes, no phone, not even a shoe. Searches continued for years. New technology came. Sonar was used to scan nearby rivers. Farmland was rechecked, canines were retrained. Yet every search ended the same way, with more questions than answers. To this day, the Swanson family has never stopped looking, never stopped hoping, never stopped asking the same, simple question that echoed down that phone line all those years ago. Where is Brandon? In the next segment, we'll examine the theories. The logical, the unlikely, the bizarre. From misadventure to foul play, from wild animals to wilder speculation, we look at everything that might explain how someone could vanish into nothing, and why some believe this case is stranger than it seems on the surface. Because people don't just disappear in the middle of a phone call, do they? Brandon Swanson's disappearance has baffled investigators, his family, and the public for over a decade, with no body, no signs of struggle, and a final phone call that ended in a chilling silence. The case has drawn widespread attention and a flood of theories. Some are rooted in logic, others stretch into the surreal, but each reflects a desperate attempt to make sense of how a person could vanish into thin air on a quiet rural road. One of the most straightforward and widely accepted explanations is that Brandon fell victim to a tragic misadventure, specifically, that he accidentally stumbled into the Yellow Medicine River or a nearby body of water. This theory is supported by the early efforts of local law enforcement and search and rescue teams, who concluded that the landscape itself may have claimed him. The night of his disappearance, the terrain was dark, uneven, and likely damped from spring thaw. Water levels in the area were high due to melting snow and recent rains, making the banks of rivers and drainage ditches slick and unstable. Scent-tracking dogs followed Brandon's trail to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River, suggesting he may have reached it on foot. The most likely scenario, according to this theory, is that Brandon, perhaps distracted during his phone call, misstepped, slipped into the river, and drowned. His body, the argument goes, could have been swept away or trapped beneath debris. But the simplicity of this idea is also its weakness. The river was thoroughly searched, using boats, divers, and sonar. Nothing was found. No body, no clothing, no cell phone. And while it's true that bodies can be hidden underwater for weeks or even months, they are rarely lost forever, especially in smaller rivers like this one. The fact that no trace of Brandon was ever found casts doubt on this theory for many. Critics argue that, even in rugged terrain, something, anything, would have surfaced eventually. The disappearance feels too total, too clean. Another possibility raised by some is that Brandon was attacked by wildlife. At first glance, this sounds far-fetched, but it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility. Coyotes, bobcats, and even black bears inhabit parts of Minnesota. A startled animal might attack if it felt cornered or threatened, and Brandon was walking alone through fields and wooded areas in the dead of night. Supporters of this theory suggest that a predator could have mauled him and dragged his body away from the path. Yet this idea quickly falls apart under scrutiny. Animal attacks, especially fatal ones, almost always leave behind evidence. Torn clothing, blood, tracks, drag marks. None of those signs were found. Furthermore, local wildlife experts point out that coyotes and bobcats are typically skittish around humans. Fatal encounters in that region are extraordinarily rare. As frightening as the idea is, most experts agree that it's unlikely Brandon was attacked by an animal. Then there's the wrong location theory, an idea based on the possibility that Brandon believed he was in one place when he was actually somewhere else entirely. During his call with his parents, he insisted he was near Lind, Minnesota, a town about 7 miles from his home. But when police later located his abandoned Chevy Lumina, it was over 20 miles away, near the town of Taunton. This confusion might seem minor, but in rural Minnesota, roads can look nearly identical in the dark. There are few landmarks and even fewer streets. The theory suggests that Brandon's call led his parents to search in the wrong direction, meaning help was always just out of reach, and that the window to find him closed before anyone knew where to look. While this idea doesn't explain what happened to him, it introduces a tragic irony that he might have survived if only he'd known where he was. Yet critics argue that the geographical mix-ups still doesn't explain why his body hasn't been found, or why the call ended so abruptly with no further movement on the open line. Another unsettling possibility is foul play. While the phone call began casually, it ended with a sudden exclamation, "Oh shit," followed by silence. The abruptness of his disappearance, the lack of a body, and the strange cell tower pings all raise red flags. To some, this suggests Brandon encountered another person, perhaps someone with malicious intent. The theory speculates that a stranger may have offered him a ride or approached him on the road, and that something went terribly wrong in that interaction. This could explain the total lack of physical evidence. If a crime occurred, the scene may have been deliberately cleaned up or took place far from where searchers were looking. There are isolated farms, barns, and abandoned buildings throughout the region that could conceal evidence. Could Brandon have stumbled upon an illegal activity, drug operations, trespassing hunters, or even a rural crime in progress, and been But this theory, too, has limitations. Law enforcement never uncovered signs of a struggle or any credible suspect. There were no reports of suspicious individuals in the area, and no one came forward with information about a possible encounter. Foul play remains possible, but unsubstantiated. Some theories drift into stranger territory. A few online discussions suggest Brandon may have had a psychological break, a sudden onset of confusion, dissociation, or even a medical emergency such as a seizure or diabetic event. In this theory, he wandered farther than anticipated, disoriented, and perhaps unaware of where he was going. Psychologists who support this idea cite cases like that of Agatha Christie, who famously disappeared for days with no memory of the event. Stress, exhaustion, or even undiagnosed mental health conditions could have triggered a break from reality. It's worth noting that Brandon was legally blind in one eye, though there's no evidence this affected his mental clarity. He did not sound panicked or confused during the call. Still, some point to his calm demeanor as misleading, masking a growing disorientation that culminated in a tragic accident. However, Brandon was known to be responsible, sober that night, and well acquainted with rural roads. His conversation with his parents remained coherent up to the last second. No slurred speech, no strange detours. This theory remains speculative at best. Finally, there are those who propose even more fringe explanations. Paranormal theories, alien abduction, or dimensional slips. These aren't supported by any evidence, of course, but they speak to the sheer frustration of the case. Proponents of these ideas, often paranormal reason, draw parallels to cases like the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident, where rational explanations fail to fully satisfy. Some suggest Brandon may have entered a thin place, a location where the barrier between worlds is weak, citing Minnesota's indigenous legends of spirit portals. While these theories are compelling in their mystery, they lack empirical evidence and are often dismissed by mainstream investigators. Still, in a case with so many unanswered questions, even the wildest ideas persist in the absence of closure. Brandon's disappearance is not just a personal tragedy. It's a reflection of how fragile our sense of certainty really is. He was doing everything right. He called his parents. He asked for help. He kept walking. And still, he vanished. The theories surrounding his case reveal more than possible outcomes. They exposed how easily a familiar world can become unknowable in the space of a single step. In the next and final segment, we turn our attention to what has happened since that night, in 2008, the long years of searching, the changes in missing persons legislation, and a family that refuses to give up hope. In the years following Brandon Swanson's disappearance, the quiet town of Marshall, Minnesota became a place shadowed by uncertainty and loss. The story might have faded into the background of other unsolved cases, but what made it stand out was the unwavering determination of the people Brandon left behind. His parents, Annette and Brandon Swanson, turned their grief into purpose, refusing to let their son's memory disappear without answers. From the earliest days, the Swansons took an active role in the search for Brandon. They organized community-wide search efforts, worked with law enforcement, and even hired private investigators. As time passed, their personal mission grew into something greater: push for change in how missing persons cases are handled in Minnesota. Brandon's disappearance revealed troubling flaws in the state's response system. When he was first reported missing, law enforcement hesitated to act immediately, because Brandon was legally an adult at 19 years old. The initial delay cost precious hours, and that inaction deeply frustrated his family. Determined to prevent similar experiences for other families, the Swansons advocated for legislative reform. In 2009, just a year after Brandon went missing, Minnesota passed what became known as Brandon's Law. This law requires that law enforcement agencies take a missing persons report immediately and begin an investigation, regardless of the individual's age or the initial assumptions about the situation. It also ensures stronger coordination between local and state authorities when searching for missing individuals. The Swansons work directly with state lawmakers, using their personal tragedy to create lasting change in the public interest. Brandon's Law has had a meaningful impact, not just in Minnesota, but also as a model for other states considering similar legislation. While it has not brought Brandon home, it has ensured faster response times and better coordination in other missing person cases. It stands as a testament to what a family can accomplish when they refuse to accept silence as an answer. Despite the passage of time, the search for Brandon has never ended. Year after year, the Swansons and dedicated volunteers returned to the fields, ditches, and waterways near Taunton and Porter. They have covered hundreds of acres by foot and ATV, bringing in specially trained cadaver dogs and using aerial searches when conditions allow. Every spring brings new hope that something lost in the thaw might finally surface. But each search has ended with the same result: no phone, no clothing, no remains. Just unanswered questions stretching across the prairie. The emotional burden of this uncertainty is difficult to describe. Families and missing persons experience a unique kind of grief, one that never fully resolves. For the Swansons, every calendar milestone is marked by Brandon's absence. His birthday, holidays, and even ordinary days bring a dull ache that never goes away. The unknown is a constant weight, made heavier by each passing year without answers. Yet they continue to share their story, speak at public events, and support others facing similar heartache. They have become advocates, not only for Brandon, but for every missing person whose case remains unresolved. The community has also remained engaged. While some residents once viewed the case as a passing mystery, many now treat it as a shared responsibility. Candlelight vigils are still held, flyers are occasionally reprinted, and Brandon's story continues to circulate through news features, online forums, and true crime podcasts. Each new retelling invites a fresh set of eyes to examine the timeline and the details, renewing the hope that someone out there might come forward with a missing piece. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case remains the final phone call. The sudden shift in Brandon's tone, his final exclamation, and the open line that followed continue to stir debate and speculation. What exactly happened at that moment? Was it an accident, an encounter with someone else, or a moment of fear misinterpreted by those listening? With no additional clues and no sign of struggle, the call remains the last known moment of contact and the closest thing to a clue in a case defined by its silence. Even now, over a decade later, the mystery of Brandon Swanson endures. His story is not just about a young man who vanished. It is about what happens when people refuse to give up. It is about parents who turned their pain into progress, a community that chose compassion over apathy, and a law that exists because one family demanded better. The search continues, not just for Brandon, but for justice, for answers, and for the hope that someday, someone will come forward with the truth. We don't know where Brandon is, and after all these years, that's the hardest part. But what we do know, what remains crystal clear, is that stories like his stay alive because people listen, because people care, because people like you take a moment out of your day, your drive, your routine, to pay attention. So thank you. Thank you for joining us on this road, for walking, in a way, alongside Brandon. for keeping him from being just another name on a missing persons list. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, even for a moment, we invite you to leave a comment. Let us know what you think might have happened. Share your thoughts, your theories, or just your reaction. Conversations like those are how cases like this continue to matter long after the news cycle moves on. And if you believe stories like Brandon S. deserve to be told, if you want more true crime that is not just sensational but personal and human, please like. It tells the platform that these stories matter, that people care, that someone somewhere is still listening and subscribing. That's how you stay connected. It's how you join us the next time we take a long drive into another mystery, another voice, another road that might not have a map. Because this channel isn't just about the crime, it's about the people, the silence that follows, and the search that never stops. So again, thank you, truly, for being here, for caring, for remembering Brandon Swanson. We'll see you in the next video.